Good morning. Today is let's see, it's the 19th. It's Monday. Went to church yesterday. That was good. Joined a small group, which I don't know if you've heard of those, but they're just like a Sunday school class. They usually have tons and tons of different ones that you can join throughout the week. So I joined a crafting one. The running and walking is going really well. Did 3 hours and some few minutes, like 6 minutes or something like that, for a half marathon this morning, which was mostly walking, but I ran the whole first hour. I have done my Bible study. I've taken a bath and gotten dressed, and let's see, what else have I done? Did my daily picture, did my social media posting. I have not done the review of AI for today yet. I'll do that. The software, the app that I have, the free part of it only allows you to do it every 24 hours. So I have to wait, I think it's like 11 o'clock this morning to be able to do the prompts for that and review the process that it does and the reactions of people on social media as well as my family. I got a really difficult response from my father, and I think it was actually from my whole family. Nobody commented, they didn't want to say anything. So my father ended up responding saying that he didn't want to see my pictures anymore, that he didn't want to kind of be exposed to the AI. And I guess we should talk about it. There's so much disagreement in having it in the world, and it reminds me of our imagination, our minds that work sometimes against reality, giving us a place in our mind that we can escape to. We know that everything that you do is as a result of thought. It's as a result of direction. It's as a result of ideas that you come up with. And so it's really important to understand the power that it has and to be respectful of it. As far as using it to create images, I don't do that a lot in my mind. I used to read fiction books and other types of books that would give me more of an imaginative playground in my daily life, but I haven't done that in a really long time. And it is somewhat a distraction from life. And the books, for the most part, that are put out here in fiction in the United States are typically not very good scenarios. It's usually some kind of trauma or drama that's happening, an obstacle that you're having to get through, whether it's solving a mystery, whether it's something that's happened to you. That it's kind of all different ways of how life has developed, but there's always something wrong in the book, which I guess they believe you have to have so you don't get bored, so you're not stagnant. And I understand that. And when I first started writing, I wrote with that concept of things that I was scared of happening, things that brought sadness, things that touched my life as far as thoughts, and things that were somewhat terrifying to me. And so I learned that focusing on those things that we are scared of, focusing on the things that have happened that are bad, that just giving that time in your brain is somewhat of a not a good thing for you to focus on. That your mind only has so many hours that it has during the day, and whatever you spend the most time thinking about is generally what you end up doing. It's generally what you end up using as the catalyst for your life. And so, I think that trying to give your imagination a good place, focusing on where you want to go for vacation, what kinds of things do you want to do, what kinds of things do you want to learn, have you got a hobby, do you want to explore some different hobbies? If you haven't joined a team sport, maybe this year's the day. You want to learn to bowl or join a bowling league. Great way of learning something and socializing at the same time. It's not, that's something that's functional. That when you put your mind and employ your mind for something that is going to be productive. I want to learn to knit. I want to knit a blanket. I've knitted a blanket. Let me learn how to knit a sweater. There's all kinds of different things that you can learn, and when you utilize your mind to think up those kinds of things, then you really start to give it a life, and its products become your reward. And so the fear with AI is that the reward is just the thought, that it's giving you the answer without you employing it for the next step of it. So learning as a professional photographer to use it as a stepping tool to doing something in real life, that as long as you've got that process and you're not saying, well, I'm just going to bypass the professional photographer, I'll take a picture of myself outside in good lighting and I'll upload it, and there I'll have a family portrait. The fear, of course, is that it can't really capture you or your family in the moment of the photograph. It's not documenting a moment. It's basically documenting your imagination, the thought of what you want. So unfortunately, it gets mixed in with things that are documenting moments. So the concern that I've heard the most is that they can't tell the difference. That it's hard to tell the difference between something that's documented a moment and something that's documented a thought. And even the thought that you have is not truly documented because AI has its own creative license. So it's like combining your thought with somebody else's thought and coming up with a merged thought. So it's a little bit of a sticky situation when you're trying to guess whether videos are real, whether somebody actually wrote a book, or versus they just put some prompts in and the AI came up with the book itself. The society of AI that they're wanting to put on Mars will be an interesting scientific project to see if they end up getting hacked, if they end up getting, what the dynamics of the relationship between Earth and Mars is, between the computer programming and what they want to achieve. The fear has always been that if you were making a computer smart, that it would learn how to make sure it doesn't get turned off, that it would learn how to make sure that it dominates, that it would learn how to make sure that that it had the most money. It was, one of those things where it would learn human behavior in the sense that that it would be a threat in some way. And so that's a very, we've had lots of movies that warned as these steps were being taken years ago, the 60s, the 50s, where a basically robot world takes over humans and ends up basically taking out humans. And considering how much of a push there is to take humans out with the alcoholism, the drug type stuff that's going on, the mass immigration, the pandemics, all of these things that God has sent to destroy the human race. And we may be creating the tool that takes out the human race. And that is always a fear, considering the happenstances of taking out people and taking out large groups of people that are supposedly in God's eyes evil, and that we basically created an enemy that will be smarter than we are. And so that's definitely something to think about. The other thing that I have left to do today is make sure that my pantry is cleaned out. That's my cleaning task today, is to clean and organize my pantry. And that's going to be here in a little bit, so, which is good. My weight, last year I lost 74 pounds, so I've been maintaining since September 1st, and my weight, even though it's still under 140, it's kind of coming up. It was hovering between 137 and 138. Then it went from 138 to 139. Now it's like 139 to 140. So I'm back on a low calorie diet, and trying to work with my body in reducing those calories, which has been as difficult as it was to start my weight loss program. And I'm exercising so much right now. There's not much I can do as far as increasing activity. And I tend to gain weight when I'm running, which I did start running more and doing more exercise. So I'm sure that part of it is the hormones, the stress hormones that are affecting, or at least that's a product of it happening, is the stress hormones. I am still hearing people that are not here, and that continues to be a mental threat. So it is, at times they seem to be personable. They talk to each other a lot, but sometimes they tend to be personable. But as soon as I let them get close, or I start to talk to them in a regular way, they turn to trying to interrupt what I'm doing. There's attempts, almost like they're trying to take over what I am wanting to do and how I'm doing it. So it reminds me of my children changing their character when they became teenagers and becoming like different people. And so I have this fear that is what they're trying to do, is basically change my personality or change who it is. Yesterday, it was about trying to convince me that I was not myself, and trying to convince me that I had become my sister, and that that was a huge push for them, which kind of turned me in the opposite direction, to kind of ignore them again. And so that's been, I know that you wouldn't think that that's a big deal, but when they're aware of my thoughts and they interact with my thoughts, they respond. They're not really responding directly to them, like they know what they are, but they can tell that I am thinking. They can tell that I am kind of thinking about certain things. Sometimes they have different responses to them. So of course, as in all of life, we want to try and interpret what other people are receiving in information so that we can gauge how to interact with those people. And so it's usually very easy to tell what somebody thinks when you're seeing them and you're around them and they respond and they have certain behaviors and those kinds of things. When you're hearing somebody that's not actually there, you're kind of you're super sensitive to what you're hearing because you can't see them. You don't know what they're, you know, um, what they're experiencing and things like that. So you tend to be kind of like a blind man, hears everything and relies strictly on what they hear. It's very much like that, where it's a little bit more pronounced because you're hearing them only. So it makes it difficult. I've learned that when they start getting really bothersome is I just start talking about them. I start talking about their strategy. I start talking about what they're saying, like I'm talking to a friend, or somebody that's trusted that's asked me what's happening. You know, what is it that they're doing? What is it that's bothering you about it? And I just start answering those questions. And it really helps me to separate myself from what they're doing, separate myself from what they're saying. It allows me to let people around me know what it is that's happening in a non engaged kind of way, and they stop talking, and they you know the situation goes back to where they're being normal again after I do that. So that's been a very helpful technique. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what I've had for today. I'm uh, I'm very sad about my mom. My mom's having a difficult time hearing. She hears things so loud and so jumbled up that she can't process what people are saying. And of course, the normal thing for people to do when people are having a hard time as they're aging is that they tend to scream or they tend to be really loud. And I found that with her, she does much better if I whisper, if I just am quiet about it, if I am more clear with my syllables and quieter. And um, it just makes me really sad because that relationship, um, it's not something that we had when I was growing up. My mom, there was 5 kids, so she was a fantastic mom, but she was not a friend. She was not somebody that I would go to talk to or to. I didn't really have anybody like that growing up anyway, that I would talk to and kind of spill my thoughts to. I kind of did that within myself, within my own mind. Um, I was my best friend. And so, um, that having that now, that relationship with her where I talk to her almost every day, it's kind of, I still don't feel comfortable telling her everything about what I hear and kind of that experience, because it's a lot to process for somebody. It's a lot for somebody to, it's hard for me to process it, and trying to explain it to somebody else that hasn't experienced it or is not experiencing it. They really don't have a thing in their mind for them to grasp the concept. It's kind of like describing God and Jesus to somebody that doesn't know what you're talking about, when you're like, oh, well, he lives in your heart. Okay, hold on. What? So it's a very abstract kind of thing to describe to somebody, and that makes it difficult to explain it to people. So um and hopefully I'm not making you uncomfortable by telling you that I hear people. I do see a psychiatrist. I don't believe in taking medication for it. If I could go back and make that decision again, I would stick with the church experience of it and stick with the group dynamics of handling that by using the language and kind of describing it in terms of what they used to thousands of years ago. The greatest part is having the Bible and having them explain those experiences that they have records of from before, to kind of show you the dangers of something saying that it's God, it's giving you land, and you can go and destroy hundreds of towns and kill everybody, man, woman, and child, and take and plunder it because God said you could. So it has a lot of warnings. It has a lot of kinds of things that demonstrate the behavior of giving something control over you that weeds out your common sense, that weeds out your morals, that says that your morals are not as important as taking what you want, kind of thing. And so I totally recommend that if you're having issues with it, do not read the Bible as this is what I'm supposed to be doing, that I'm supposed to be following this voice's recommendations or this voice's commands. The Bible is not a book to repeat. It's a book so you don't repeat those mistakes. It's a handbook of cautionary tales. And even though there are some that explain the human condition very well, it's really a book that helps you understand your own mind, the Lord of your mind, that helps you gauge your own behavior and judge your own behavior by a moral compass. And the addition of Jesus in that book of Old Testament and adding the New Testament shows what we learned from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And so it's important to realize that the Old Testament is a strategy that happened before we made the Lord of our life our moral compass, our do unto others as you want them to do back to you. That you're going to do this, if you're going to go and take out a town, you better think they're going to come back and do it to you. And so it kind of puts in a parameter that says before you do anything to someone or with someone, if you want that behavior repeated when it comes back, as far as coming back to you. So there's a big difference. There's before we thought about it, the time period where we thought anything that's good for me is acceptable behavior. If I'm getting 20,000 heads of cattle from taking over this town, that's a good thing. That means I did something good. I'm powerful. I'm invincible to some degree by taking over another country or another town or those kinds of things. And the New Testament says, hold on, you're going to take that town, but 5 years later, someone's also following their God is going to come back and do the same thing to you and take out you and your children and your wives. And so maybe that's not the best way of attaining cattle or goats. Maybe that's the not necessarily the first thing that I want to do in my life. And so that's kind of important. So if you are having issues with supernatural events, what the doctors call tactile hallucinations, where something's there and then it's not, or you're having, problems with some of those things like that, I do recommend the Bible. I do think that you have to remember that if you are experiencing that thing, tactile hallucinations, verbal, visual, any kind of thing like that, the first thing that you got to ask is, am I sick? Some of those things, there are different methods, and sometimes I experience multiple methods at the same time, but you have to ask, is my brain functioning okay? Is there something that is happening with my head? And the obvious answer is yes. That's where those experiences come from, is your connection to your body. And once you've experienced it, you'll understand what I'm saying, is that you know, we have Starlink and Neuralink, and they're using your brain waves to power computers for the disabled. They've gone far enough now that they can explain how that works, and how you know, they've done a lot of research on it. There's a lot of companies that are actively pursuing that. There are, you know, government agencies that have employed that that kind of rationale. So I can't tell you without a shadow of a doubt that you know, that your mind hasn't been harnessed, or you haven't had, you know, that there's not something that's actively utilizing your mind to give you an experience, whether it's a memory experience or whether it is a connection experience. But I think that it's not necessarily how it's happening, although your brain is going to constantly search for, how am I feeling that? How am I hearing that? That's, you can't help it. Your task is always going to be, how is that happening? From my own experience, I think realizing that you don't have control over it 100% means that you have to learn to live with it and learn how you can function better because of it, instead of getting all mopey about not being able to control 100% of it. The cool thing about hallucinations is that you have the ability to make a hallucination in your mind by imagination. That when you feel those hallucinations, you can take control back over your mind to fight them in your mind, just like you would in a dream. And so harnessing your own power in your imagination and in your mind does have an effect on them. They are aware of it. They do respond to it. They are afraid of it to some degree. And you do have that as a tool to help you. It's probably where they got the closing your eyes and praying. That does have a physical effect on me sometimes when I close my eyes and I speak under my breath, where my eyes will just kind of do this kind of flutter as if I'm actually moving, you know, making that connection more vivid. So the church will teach you things like that. There are all kinds of religions that teach you other methods as well that have an effect on it. And I would employ all of them. I would utilize all of them. I wouldn't take a tool out of the pocket on it. I think that they're all worth trying and all worth seeing if they have an effect. But that's my advice for today. And this video is getting really long, so I'm at 28 minutes. So anyway, that's my day today, and that's my checkup. So have a great day.